The Washington Commanders got dismantled by the Philadelphia Eagles, losing 24-8 in their home stadium. What went wrong and what went a little bit less wrong right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Sticks. Make sure you check that out. We thank you for making us first listen, first view every single day, whether you're joining us live here on YouTube or listening or watching later. We greatly appreciate you for joining us. I'm David Harrison, my co-host here, Chris the Rooster Russell. Both of us credential media covering your Washington Commanders. We're here at FedEx Field Sunday afternoon, evening, actually by now, following the aforementioned loss. You can find Chris Pete Medhurst live on the Team 980 Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern or anytime on the Audacy app. You can find me at Commander Country, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, where I do my writing over there.
All right, David, we are here at FedEx Field, as you mentioned. And I guess, our main storyline of the game is the Commanders went punch for punch, toe-to-toe, whatever adage you want to use, for one quarter with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then it completely fell apart and completely got dismantled in the span of 15 minutes. They were nothing early in the second quarter here at FedEx Field. And before halftime actually started, in a flash almost, they were down 24-0, and they never really recovered from there. I mean, what other big storyline is there? I mean, we're going to get to Carson Wentz in a second. He was a big part of that, but that is the overall arching storyline.
Yeah, that's basically the way that it went down. I think that, we'll get to our silver linings at the end of this game here at the end of this episode, but I'm going to throw one out here real quick. The good news is the Washington Commanders either tied or did better than the Philadelphia Eagles in 3 of the 4 quarters in this game. From a scoreboard standpoint, anyway. The bad news is that one quarter they got blown out of the water. And Chris, the defense was the question coming into this game. That was the main storyline. That's what everybody was talking about. We had people who wanted defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio fired after what happened in Detroit. And I'm not going to lie, guys, there were some conversations around the stadium here wondering if this defense came out and had a similar type or even worse performance, would Jack actually make it to Dallas? Now, I would go on record saying that I would think that he would make it to Dallas just because of circumstances and everything. But that's what happened. The defense actually rose up and they held on for, I think, as long as you can reasonably expect a defense to rise up and hold on with little to no support from the offense. We're talking about complimentary football. That is not what we had in today's game. In the second quarter alone, the Washington Commanders offense held the ball for 5 minutes and 55 seconds. That's 4 drives. 4 drives, 5 minutes and 55 seconds worth of game time. That's not good. Okay. On the other side of that, the Philadelphia Eagles, right, they held the ball for 9 minutes and 4 seconds. Now, listen, the field goal drive that got the scoring started only lasted 7 seconds into the second quarter. They were actually on that drive in the first quarter. 7 seconds into the second quarter, they kicked the field goal. So that only accounts for 7 seconds. The second drive of the second quarter only accounts for 45 seconds because that's when Washington gave the ball back deep in their own zone and giving up a touchdown, which means, Chris, that 3 other drives in the second quarter for the Philadelphia Eagles account for about 8 minutes of possession. So those 3 drives that don't even count 2 of the drives that ended in the second quarter anyway, account for more time than the Washington Commanders had the entire second.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, 6 plays, 64 yards, 2 minutes and 49 seconds. So even the third drive was real quick. That was the A.J. Brown touchdown. The real one, the long one, in terms of plays, was 11 plays, 88 yards. But David, it only took up 157 because the Eagles operated in the 2-minute offense truly under the 2-minute warning and scored on the final play of the first half. we're going to, listen, we have to spin forward. We have to talk about the game. We have to move forward, but we have to look back on what went wrong. The turning point for me in this game, you kind of mentioned it. They were down 3-0. It's actually a 3-play sequence, but it's 2 plays that are bracketed in between, one play that doesn't really matter. And that was Wentz trailing 3-0 and the Commanders trailing 3-0. He had already been sacked 3 times. He gets sacked for a 4th time, loses a fumble. Brandon Graham hits him kind of from behind. Javon Hargrave scoops it up. They recover to the Eagles at the Washington 24. 2 plays later, after a 1-yard run, Dallas Goedert off of an I formation play action, a tight end backdoor screen, rumbles in almost virtually untouched because the Commanders were sucked in. Defense just wasn't able to recover, and it goes as a 23-yard touchdown. And even though it was only 10-0 at that point, because of the nature of, again, that was, I believe, sack 4 at that point, and because of the lost fumble, the position, and the quick turnaround on offense for the Eagles, it almost felt like, okay, guys, we're done toying with you. We're done sparring with you. Now we're going for the knockout punch. And they did.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. Real quick shout out to Chris and King in the live chat here on YouTube. If you're with us, we appreciate you. I know it's hard topics to talk about, hard topics to sit in and listen or watch through. So we appreciate all of you who are joining us and listening to this even after the live is done as well. And Chris, that's a good turning point. I think that's probably the biggest turning point. But for me, another turning point in this game and really kind of, you want to call it the final nail in the coffin, even though it's weird because it's not even halftime yet. Well, it actually was halftime after a 2-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith, who I heard an Eagles beat writer in the press box say that this was a career day for Devontae Smith. I haven't confirmed that, so I'll just trust that the Eagles reporters know what they're talking about.
I think it was.
So it seems like it makes sense. And that touchdown pass came against Kendall Fuller. Also came a little shortly after, I think it was the 48-yard pass came against Kendall Fuller to put them in the scoring position in the first place. And for me, at that point in time, you're down 17-0. It hasn't gone well, right? But you're about to go into the half. You have an opportunity to potentially stop them because of the dual injuries. They were out of timeout, so there's a running clock. They're scrambling. They're in a hurry. You're in a hurry. But if you come up with that play, the half is over. There's no points. You're still down 17-0. You can go in, lick your wounds, come out, and if you make an opening half stop, you're still in this game, and you still have an opportunity to salvage something. But because of that score, you go in the locker room down even further than you already were, and things just kind of snowball from there.
Think about it. Could have been worse. They also, before that, they had 4th down and goal stop, right? So, I mean, it could have been, I guess, 27-0 or 31-0, quite honestly, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming up, guys, we're going to get into our offensive breakdown and our defensive breakdown, and who really was at fault for the Commanders after this 24-8 final score and loss to drop to 1-2. But now a word from our sponsor, our friends at BetterHelp. People in my life tell me, and they're probably right, that I focus on problems. I think everyone is against me at times, especially on Twitter and traffic, and that I don't take time to think of the good things. Well, it can be tough to train your brain stay in problem-solving mode and, again, not be woe is me when faced with challenges in your life, right? But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. Sometimes that solution is just taking a step back, taking a deep breath. Probably Ron Rivera taking a lot of deep breaths because, boy, is his team in lots of trouble. Sometimes a therapist, though, can help you become a better problem solver. Maybe you don't have to do it all on your own. Maybe it's easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small, with some professional help. That's where BetterHelp comes in. That's right. Now you can unload some stress in a safe and positive manner, get some emotional healing, and help with some anxiety and some depression. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, guys, and many of us are, BetterHelp is a great option. You don't have to go anywhere. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist of your choice after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can help you get there. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. That's better, HELP, BetterHelp.com/locked-on. All right, once again, back here at FedEx Field. Thanks for making Locked On Commanders your first listen and view each and every day. All right, David, before we get to your offensive takeaways, I'll start with mine. The overall arching theme in this one is Carson Wentz was just destroyed in the pocket and everywhere else. He was sacked a total of 9 times. That's right, 9 times. That's one short of the franchise record, 10. You know how I know that?
You were here.
Well, we weren't here. We were north of the border, in Toronto at the Sky Dome where the Blue Jays play. The Buffalo Bills then played home games, won a game a year. Trust me, I was there. John Beck, Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, the boys, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, all the head coaches this great organization has let walk right out the window. I think the final score was like 24-0 or something like that. John sacked 10 times that day. Quite honestly, Carson Wentz could have been sacked 10 or 11 times. The question is, obviously it's a mix of the offensive line in pretty much every spot, and Wentz for sure. Wentz took accountability. He said, look, it's not all on the offensive line. Some of that's on me. He's right. Roughly watching the game live right next to you. I don't know how you had it. I had it about, maybe Wentz 5 and the offensive line 4, maybe the offensive line 5 and Wentz 4. Not sure how you kind of preliminarily graded it, but nothing went right offensively today for the Commanders.
No, absolutely. And I mean, for the sack problem early on, right, I think it was offensive line problems. And then, again, shout out to the live chat. We've got some guys in here talking about, early on, there's just no time, and the Philadelphia Eagles really weren't all that exotic about it. They're just kind of going mano a mano coming up and just saying that our guys are better than your guys, and we're going to bother your quarterback. And it worked really well. And then as the game kind of progressed, I think there was a stretch there where Carson was holding the ball too long, trying to maybe be a little bit too perfect, knowing that, they were under the gun and a turnover would just obviously make things even worse than they already were. And so I think he was being a little too careful with the football at times and trying to find the perfect read instead of the good read and all those things. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you can call it a 70-30 split, a 60-40 split, whatever you want to call it. Either way, as a team, as a group, the offensive line and quarterback, they've got to get better. And Carson even said, you don't get to 9 unless the quarterback is responsible for some of that. So it's not all on the O-line. It's certainly not all on Carson. It's a team effort. It's a group effort. And I think that's where they're going to move forward with it.
Before we get to your offensive takeaway, I'll just add one thing. Charles Leno telling you reporters, I don't know if you were in this scrum, quote, it's like we're constipated. Couldn't get beep. And he didn't say beep. But
yeah.
I mean, that pretty much sums it up. Yep. I mean, that's Charles Leno, who, by the way, struggled.
He
was included in
absolutely.
That. I got to say, Charles has been very good since coming here. He had a rough day.
Yeah, it was one of his less than stellar days, including some costly penalties. Look, bottom line, at least 1 sack on 5 of the first 6 possessions. That's not winning football. In that group, 2 strip sacks, 1 lost fumble. Fortunately, they didn't lose the second one, or else it would have gotten even worse. And then, Chris, we've got defense takeaways as well. I'll jump in here real quick, and I've kind of already touched on it. Cornerback Kendall Fuller, veteran team captain, right? The teams are going without William Jackson III, who tweaked his back at some point, going into the weekend. Saw him on the field trying to work through it. He was in obvious pain, obvious discomfort, looked very, very stiff. And I'll tell you, as a guy who's got a lingering back injury myself, I know that look. And I know how gingerly you walk. So I wasn't very confident watching him go through those. And ultimately, he was inactive. So that's when you need guys like Benjamin St-Juste, Kendall Fuller to kind of step up. Early on, Jalen Hurts targeted Benjamin St-Juste, got away with one, I think that we'll talk about here in a minute, but ultimately Benjamin really kind of stepped up, and I think he did fairly well for the most part. So he kind of went after Kendall. And then he started to eat, and that's the problem. Kendall Fuller in that first half, in that second quarter specifically, gave up 2 explosive plays, a 38-yard pass from Hurts to A.J. Brown in the second quarter. And I got it, A.J. Brown, very tough guy to defend. But when you're the veteran captain cornerback, and your team is struggling, you got to kind of find a way to step up. And then again, a 44-yard pass from Hurts to Smith that took the ball to the 1, which eventually gave up the touchdown pass to Smith against Kendall Fuller again. And in the locker room, took full responsibility and said, look, it's the NFL, and he's a veteran. He knows he's got to make plays. They're paid to make plays too, but he's paid to make them better than those guys. Today, he didn't do it.
Yeah. So I'll just add this. Everything he just said, David just said, absolutely correct. To me, I've been down on Kendall Fuller for a while. I mean, I've tried to be fair. He had moments last year where he's fine. He has had a couple moments so far this year where he's been okay. But he's leaking a lot of oil, and that's all 3 games. He was beaten by Christian Kirk for a long, almost 50-yard pass in week 1, beaten for a big touchdown, and really 2 last week. And then again, what just illustrated. Here's one thing that I will say. A lot of Commanders fans out there, David, want them to play more man. Mm-hmm. Now, some of their man coverages do look like zone, so it's hard to tell. The reason why they don't play more true man is because Kendall Fuller can't play man. Yep. Now, the problem is he's struggling also in zone. He just doesn't have the wheels. And Devontae Smith on one particular play, a crossing route that you and I noticed, pretty clear. I mean, he absolutely blowtorched him. And that's the problem when you go against electric speed like he's going against every week. He can't keep up.
Yeah, look, no disrespect intended towards Devontae Smith, right? Superb talent, great young player, great young man. I'm sure he's in better physical shape right now than I've probably ever been. Even at my peak of physical conditioning in the Army, probably better shape than I've ever been. But if you're getting out physicaled by Devontae Smith, that's a problem.
Out physical because you're going to be outrun, basically, and out talented. Real quickly, I'll just add one thing. Again, the explosive plays hurting the Commanders again. I think it was 5 today that went for over 30 yards. Obviously, Devontae Smith had a big role in that. We'll break that down more throughout the week. But the only positive that I can come up with overall from a big picture standpoint, once again, they were pretty good on third down, 5 of 15 for the Eagles. And if I'm counting right, that's only 12 third down conversions on the year. And I believe it's 42 attempts, whatever that percentage is. They were tied for 5th coming into the NFL. I believe it's 12 of 42 now on the year. It might be 12 of 43. Don't kill me if I'm off by a number, but you get the point. That's really the only thing right now. And this loss wasn't totally on the defense, wasn't mostly on the defense. Right. So, and that's kind of the problem. So that's really our defensive takeaways, guys. From this game, I mean, of course, we're going to dig through the tape as we go throughout the week and try and get you more as they try and figure things out. Going to Arlington, David is scheduled to be at AT&T Stadium next Sunday against Cooper Rush and the Cowboys, who play on Monday Night Football against the New York Giants, who are 2-0. We'll be on the hunt for silver linings next. Is there a silver lining in the rainbow that doesn't exist behind us? We will find out right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
All right, guys, final segment here on this, unfortunately, Defeat Monday edition, right? Thank you for all of you joining us live Sunday evening, but for the rest of you watching Monday or listening on audio platforms Monday, Defeat Monday. So not the way you want to start the week necessarily.
We call it Misery Monday on the radio.
Monday. There you go.
I don't know if you like that or not. I mean,
I've been covering the Bucs for the last couple of years, so I forgot what Misery Monday actually was called, and I'm starting to learn it. Unfortunately,
they don't lose very often.
Well, last I checked, they were losing the Packers. We'll see how that's going.
Heard that.
So listen, even in the worst of losses, all right, and this is something that I did learn covering the Buccaneers. Even in the worst of losses, it's important to find the good, because the good is where you can build your team, and eventually, right? You take a lot of losses, but eventually you put the Mike Evans on the field with the Levante Davids, and you get it put together, and you end up with Lombardi. That's what we're all angling for here. That's what everybody wants to cover, talk about, watch, and of course these guys want to experience. So we're looking for silver linings here. What can this team hope to build upon to maybe defeat the Dallas Cowboys next week? They're in Jerry's world as we go there. So for me, it's going to be Benjamin St-Juste. And look, Benjamin wasn't perfect, right? He did give up a pretty big explosive play. As far as my angle is concerned, the replay angle that I saw, Ron Rivera is pretty confident as well. I know Benjamin is very confident. He was out of bounds. He didn't get both feet down. That should have been an overturned play. Ron admitted in the press conference after the game that he was late getting the flag out. That's unfortunate. It's obviously not something you want to have happen, but it did happen. You move on. But other than that play, and then there was like a 14-yard pass that he gave up. But the biggest thing that stood out to me, though, Chris, is that Jalen Hurts on not his first 3 specifically, but on 3 specific third downs, he targeted Benjamin St-Juste. And this was before he started targeting Kendall Fuller. And all 3 of those times, Benjamin St-Juste came up and made the play. He was in great position. There's one play where I was a little worried he might get flagged. Didn't get his head around. I was like, maybe he gets a flag there. They didn't throw the flag. And as we saw later on, John Bates experienced. They weren't throwing flags for some things in this game. They probably should have. So what's fair is fair for one side, is fair for both sides. But Benjamin St-Juste, again, not perfect by any means, but very, very solid. And I think in a game, again, William Jackson III is out. So I think that, the Eagles came out targeting these young defensive backs. And I think Benjamin St-Juste stepped up in a pretty good way.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that. I mean, St-Juste actually had a fourth third down pass defense in the back of the end zone. I think that was after things started going wild against Kendall Fuller, to your point. Like, there was the first three, and then there was a little, hey, we might want to go here. We found 6 here. And then they did go back at St-Juste one time, but he still broke it up. Again, not perfect, but 4 passes defended or broken up on third down. You'll sign up for that every day. For me, a couple of silver linings, if you will. Cole Holcomb had a 4th down stop. I had talked to somebody that had knowledge of things, let's just say, and they said that Cole Holcomb was going to be kind of the guy that was assigned to spy, mirror, what have you, Jalen Hurts in this particular game. Well, this was on a 4th and inches or 4th and 1. I believe it was inside the 5-yard line. Maybe it was right around the 5-yard line. Can't remember. And they ran kind of a jet give, an inside jet sweep, and he was blown up against Zach Pascal by Cole Holcomb, who had mugged up in the A-gap and then bounced out when he recognized the sweep action and still blew it up. So good for him. In addition to St-Juste and what David obviously illustrated, and then Deron Payne, right, with the monster safety to get the only 2 points at that point, on the board early 4th quarter for the Washington Commanders. Deron Payne overall has been much more explosive, noticeable, dominant so far in 3 games this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Deron is doing well for himself. I think you still want to see him take another step up the ladder a little bit, but I think so far you have to be happy with what you're seeing out of Deron Payne. And yeah, that whole sequence. I mean, this is just kind of one of those games, Washington gets a field goal, there's a flag, gives them another first down. They get pretty much right up to scoring a touchdown. They end up with that loss from Antonio Gibson. Puts them right back where they started, where they tried the field goal in the first place from the 14-yard line. And then, they get a play that makes them, Carson scrambles and gives them a little bit of a hope. So they go from having 3 points, burning more time off the clock to no points. And then they go to 2 points. It's just, it was just kind of a crazy sequence that really kind of balls up the entire energy of the game today. But we'll talk more about this game tomorrow on our next episode, but we also have some other stories that broke before the game that we've got to talk about as well coming on Tuesday's episode.
Absolutely. Jimmy Garoppolo, there was a major report from Adam Schefter of ESPN that Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers had worked out a trade to the Commanders at the combine meetings. Again, before the Commanders traded for Carson Wentz, Ron Rivera had a strong rebuttal for that. We will talk all about that particular issue, that storyline. And then over the weekend as well, Dan Snyder, there was a big story from the Washington Post that owners are inching towards trying to get the band together, to get 24 votes, to get Dan ousted from NFL ownership or to push him hard to sell. I'll just say this, there's a key figure, a shadowy key figure. He might be on the radar screen next Sunday at Jerry's World that will play heavily into what happens with Dan. We're going to talk in excess might be the wrong word. We're going to talk about both of those stories in detail. How about that? On the next edition of the Locked On Commanders podcast. But that is going to do it for us right here on this edition of LOC, live from FedEx Field. We appreciate you guys being with us, and thank you for making us your first listen and your first view of the day. Now make the Peacock and Williamson NFL show your second listen and view. Brian Peacock, former NFL scout Matt Williamson. They get you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. You want to hop in? 301-615-3577. Let your voice be heard. Shout it out, guys. Just do it in a respectful manner so we can use it. Or Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com. For my partner, David Harrison, who covers the Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation and Commanders Country, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 with the Audacy app as well, anytime free and on demand, how you can listen to this show. Please be safe out there. Be kind to one another. Don't you dare drive like a maniac. And thank you for joining us right here from FedEx Field on the Locked On Commanders podcast.